Hi, my name is Jesse Haugen, and I wrote the music for a game called Taria and Como, and it's a game that you play on this. Taria and Como is a physics-based puzzle platformer where movement is built around swinging instead of jumping. Play as Taria, a young girl with a prosthetic leg, as she rescues her little sister Como in the midst of a world that constantly underestimates her. Separated after a disaster, Taria wakes up in a hospital where she's forced to use an approved prosthetic that limits her mobility. Undeterred, she takes control of her own fate using ingenuity and sheer determination to escape and find her sister. In this video, I'm going to take you through my process of scoring the game. We're going to look at the cue-based sessions of some of the main musical cues, and we're just going to do a deep dive into how we created the musical sound world of Taria and Como. Oh, and if it isn't obvious, this video is basically going to contain every spoiler imaginable for the game, so if you want to experience the game without knowing all of that ahead of time, you can buy it from the Panic catalog on Playdate. You can also buy the entirety of Season 2, which contains a ton of incredible, inspiring, amazing games by small developers. If I had to choose, I would say you should do that. If you don't have the means to do that, or you simply don't want to, I've also linked a video here and in the description below where you can watch an entire commentary-free playthrough of the game, which is another great way to just experience the story and get kind of the vibe of the game. So now that I have made that disclaimer and you know that you're getting into spoiler territory here, we're going to jump into how I made music for this that comes out of this. Okay, so what you're looking at here is Pulp, and this is probably not at all what you were expecting to see. See, typically, I make music in a DAW, like Cubase, Logic, Pro Tools, Reaper. There's a million you could use. They're all awesome, but none of them look like this. This is a web-based, basically like game designer for Playdate. And we had some really severe challenges when we started trying to make the music for this game. The main thing we realized was that we needed our audio files to be super small, and we needed them to not be compressed like MP3 because that was intensive on the CPU for the Playdate, which is not nearly as powerful as a modern console. And if you're using MP3s, it has to decode them, and then you lose frame rate. So we needed fully streamed audio that was small, and that was really hard. And so we started exploring some other options for how to get great music into the game that wasn't as big. And so one of the things that our developer Cesar realized was that the Playdate had a built-in synth that you could actually program, like in code, to play in the game. And the easiest way for us to do that was to use this in Pulp, which basically has 5 voices: a sine wave, a square wave, a sawtooth wave, a triangle wave, and then a noise, which is like kind of, noise sound. And we use this to make some of the cues in the game. Specifically, this was really good for the types of things where we had to do more complex interactions with the music. So just to give you an idea of what this sounds like, this is the arcade, which the arcade in the game is a really cool place. It has playdates. There are things in the game called playports. They look like playdates. It's very clever of us. And so we thought it would be fun to have it actually be the sound of the playdate for the arcade. So this is what that sounded like. So yeah, it's awesome. It kind of sounds like old Game Boy music. And the way that you make it, you literally just click in notes. And so I made all of these by clicking in the notes and making music in a way I haven't really since like Mario Paint Composer. That's a throwback. I bet few of you watching this video know what Mario Paint Composer is. But as I was saying, we use this a lot for the more of the interactive music in the game. So a great example of that is this dancing frog. If you've played the game, it's one of everyone's favorite things in the game. It has this cute little song that sort of sounds like this. As you can tell, we have a little bit of fun dissonance in there, but then we also did this thing where as you speed up the crank, it actually increases the tempo in the code, which makes the song go faster. And I had the developer add a ring modulator to a couple of the signals, so it starts getting weird and like distorted and strange. And all of that is a really great way to use the onboard synth in Playdate to get a very interactive feel. Here's what that looks like in game. Now, the cue where we did the most in Pulp was easily the boss fight at the very end of the game. The finale of this game has you battle your relentlessly annoying health bot, Dr. Prixie, as she tries to drag you away from playports where you're attempting to enter an override code to end her meddling in your life for good. The director Kip and I wanted a very retro gamey style boss battle music cue for this, and our programmer, Cesar, had the brilliant idea of having the music change and ramp up with each number inputted into the playports. This was a perfect opportunity to stretch what was possible in Pulp and really try to do something the old school way. Okay, so how did we actually do this? Basically, we broke up because each of the songs, quote unquote, in here could only be like 32 bars, I think it was. And so we broke up the multiple stages of the boss fight into multiple different songs that the developer could stitch together in the code and then hit the trigger points and make it all work together. So we have this thing called Calm, which is sort of like the building up of the boss fight. This happens the first time you kind of have a conflict with Dr. Prixie in the game, but then it also happens in the sort of build up part of the final boss fight as well. And that's super simple, and it sounds like this. You know, just kind of building and growing, adding layers. And then eventually at some point the fight actually starts, and that is when we get this. Building, and then we get to this region, which will actually And so yeah, that loops back, and that'll keep going until you enter actually the second number, because it was a little too fast to do it from the first number, which transitions to this section. Very Game Boy. And basically, if you're wondering how I sort of thought about constructing these, they each have these intro sections which don't loop. So like if we go to the end here, this doesn't loop all the way back to the intro, it loops back to here. You know, so it gives me, that's like sort of my transition material in each of the different cues for the boss fight. And then I kind of treated my noise channel like I don't know, like a percussion. And then the sign was often the bass, and then the other voices are either doing arpeggios or melodies or harmonies, and then I kind of switched them. And I honestly did just make this in here. Like I didn't make it in Cubase and then transition over. I literally clicked all this in, which was like weird because I haven't written music like that much, but it kind of just made me do weird, cool things like crazy chromatic runs and little neighboring tone chromatic things. It just made me write music that was different, particularly in this final stage of the boss fight, which I think is really fun. It sounds like this. Just ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, it's just chaos. It's like blurs of notes that sort of, as a conglomerate, make something tense and crazy, and I love it for that reason. It's kind of special because of that, and it worked really well for this portion of the game. And yeah, so that's how we use Pulp. Okay, so we figured out how to use Pulp to play the built-in synth engine on the Playdate itself, and this ended up being a great solution for us. It was very limited in file size. I mean, literally, it's basically just code, so it's almost negligible. It didn't lead to performance issues. I mean, this is what this thing is built to do. But it was a little bit limited. And so as I thought about doing the score as a whole, I really fought for still being able to make some music with the things that you see around me here in my studio the way that I normally do, to really try and get to that emotional core of the story. And when we originally did the prototype for this game a year before we started production on the Playdate version of the game, I had done like a bunch of like mallet percussion instruments like marimba and vibraphone. It was a very acoustic score, and obviously because we're using the built-in synth engine on the Playdate, that wouldn't really fit, but then also it didn't sound good because in order to get the file sizes small enough, we had to do an 80 PCM encoding of the wave, which created like some artifacts and noise that just didn't sound good with the acoustic instruments. And we couldn't use MP3s because even though they're small, they take a lot of processing power to decode in the game, so we were dropping frames. So yeah, basically we needed to do waves, we needed to do the 80 PCM encoding, and it needed to fit with the pulp sounds that we were using on the Playdate itself. And so that's what led us to analog synthesizers. For whatever reason, I mean, obviously they fit with the built-in synth engine sounds because they're of the same source. They're also just sine or saw or triangle waves that are manipulated in the same way that the built-in synth engine is on the Playdate. But also with the artifact noise introduced by the 80 PCM conversion, for whatever reason with the analog synths, it was almost not noticeable. And I don't know if that's just because they already kind of have a sort of noise floor, or if it's just the kind of noise that almost sounds like it belongs in the synth anyway. But when I did the conversion on the cues with the analog synths, it just sounded fine. It sounded good. And so basically we tried to keep the same soul of the music from the prototype, but reimagine it on, I mean, mostly the Juno 60 is honestly what most of this score is. And then we wanted to keep one acoustic element, and the acoustic element that we kept was the cello. And thankfully, with the 80 PCM conversion, the cello didn't create a lot of artifacts. It also sounded really great on the little Playdate speaker. And I was so, when we tested that and it worked, it made me so happy because it's like, yes, we get to hold on to something human in this. And I think what resulted was an ensemble or a collection of sounds that I never otherwise would have thought to do. It's like a bed of kind of ambient, arpeggiated, moving analog synthesizers with a like solo legato cello melody on top. And it's cool. It totally works. I feel like it very quickly became the game to me, but it's just fun because that was born out of necessity of the restrictions of the Playdate, and I think it's just a really cool example of how the restrictions of the Playdate lead you to a place as a developer, or in my case as a composer, that I never would have gone before. So we're going to jump into those cues. Those live in Cubase. Let's go check them out, and we're going to start right now with one of my favorite ones, and the first thing you hear when you open the game, the main menu. Let's check it out. We wanted the title music for Taria and Como to be relaxing and simple, something that doesn't give too much away but hints at the sound world to come and the emotional story ahead of you. We wanted it to be something you could leave playing for hours without realizing. Non-invasive, but enjoyable. Okay, so if you watched my YouTube videos before, you may have seen sessions that are a lot more complicated than this. And this session isn't an outlier when it comes to the score for Taria and Como. In general, I was really trying to do, because of, again, the restrictions of the Playdate and this tiny little mono speaker, something that was a lot more minimalist than I normally do. Usually I have cues that are 70, 80 tracks. This is, really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stems is really all this is. And you'll see as we go through these, this is pretty consistent actually for the types of sessions and the size of the cues that I was writing for this game. The bread and butter of these is basically all, like I mentioned before, the analog synthesizers. So this one uses my Korg Monologue for like a bass sound, which sounds like this. Just a super nice kind of plucky, almost like an upright bass. Boom, boom, boom. Kind of pleasant, lovely, like I sort of described that we were going for. And then the meat, the bread and butter, the main course of the score of this game is by far the Juno 60. And if you look in the sessions here, I have MIDI. That's because I can send MIDI out of Cubase to any one of these synths. I made a video about my template and how I do that. I've linked that above and in the description below if you want to check that out. But yeah, basically I can send MIDI to everything. So when I'm writing, a lot of times I'll be writing like on the MIDI keyboard like I normally do. It's playing the synths and then I'll record it in with the synths later. But yeah, the background kind of part, or arpeggiated part, I did a lot of arpeggios in this score, is this patch in Juno, and this is patch 23, which is a custom patch I did on the Juno, and it really is probably the most used patch in this score. It's a really nice, round, kind of big, it has the chorus, and it's I have some Echo Boy and some Realm reverb on it, and it sounds like this. Just really round, really pleasant. And then another thing that's building out this cue is this. This is actually not an analog synth. This is Teletone Audio's Anamorph. Really love this plugin. It's really, really awesome. This is one of my favorite patches from them called Chorus Acquire. It sounds like this. It's like maybe like weird little voices. It's definitely a pad. But yeah, all those three elements together sound like this. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm just outlining some simple chords. It's like F major 7 to A minor 7 to E flat 9 to B flat major 7. And the way that those chords came about was in the end credits cue, which was one of my original brainstorms for this game once we knew it was going to be a Playdate game. I came up with this melody. It's so incredibly simple. And it goes like this. It's incredibly simple, but the way that it plays out is it's kind of syncopated over the chords. If I go forward to where the cello plays it, if you look at the MIDI from the cello where I wrote it, it comes in on beat 2, it moves a lot on the and of 1, on beat 3. There's a lot of movements on weak beats of the measure, which is what gives it this kind of floating feeling. It always reminded me a little bit of like a Jonesy melody from Sigur. Like there's something, like I could hear him singing it. It's very floaty over the top. If I just play that with the background chords, this is what that sounds like. Yeah, so you see it kind of like weaves in and out. It's not really ever playing on downbeats. It just feels like it's floating in and amongst everything. And this is that live cello we recorded with Isaiah, who's absolutely incredible. This is what that sounds like isolated. Just brilliant cello playing. I've got a little bit of EQ on there, getting rid of the bottom end, carving out some of the low mids. I have this channel strip by Focusrite on there, doing some compression, adding some top end, and then my go-to, I've got Realm doing some lovely airy atmospheric reverb over all of it. The only other elements in this cue anyway are this little arpeggiated figure that comes in. It's a patch from the Juno again that I made. I love this. And I actually have it panning left to right. You can see the automation here. Obviously, that doesn't come across on the mono speaker, but if you plug in headphones, it does. And even in mono, it kind of gives this like coming in and out effect that is cool, and that sounds like this. And then I have these two percussion tracks, which is stuff I pulled from some other stuff, I think. The first one is this. It's cool kind of noise percussion. I did that for a lot of the percussion. And they kind of trade. The other one sounds like this. So cool. A lot of left-right stuff. And if you put them together, you can see with the waveforms, they sort of just like fill in the gaps for each other. Yeah, and all together, it comes together and it sounds like this. So yeah, I mean, that's really the heart and soul of what this main menu cue is. One other thing is I gave a lot of thought to how it would loop. So if you look at the arrangement, it starts very simple, adds a layer, adds a lot more layers, takes out a layer, gets simple. So then by the end, if it loops, it sounds really nice. Yeah, and it's really easy. So simple to more complex, peaks in the middle, back down to simple so that it can loop really nicely. No one really ever sits on the main menu that long, but if you did, you could listen to it for hours and hours and hours, and hopefully it wouldn't get old. So yeah, that's the main menu cue. The next thing you actually hear in the game is when you actually start the game, and that's the cue we're going to look at next, so let's check that out. Taria and Como begins with a series of levels teaching you how to play the game. There are a ton of expositional story moments and world building in this arc, and this is really where you learn, and I think fall in love with, swinging. Kip and I wanted this music to be full of energy, to feel fun and engaging. We wanted it to get you stoked for the game ahead and feel like, you know what, hell yeah, this is fun and I can't wait for more. We also, as we did with pretty much all the music in this game, wanted to remain aware of the unfolding emotional story and these characters who you are getting to know. Okay, so one kind of fun bit of behind the scenes information when it comes to this tutorial music, or on the OST it's called Swinging Home, is if you listen to it on the soundtrack, it starts with this really simple, again, that same Juno patch that's kind of the background of a lot of this score. That sounds like this. But if you listen to it in the game, the first thing you actually hear is this. So this song basically has 3 distinct sections in it, and we felt when we actually got to putting it into the game that starting with that slow spaced out stuff, which we did love, it's nice to have a break in the score in a lot of these cues that's a lot slower and more spaced out, because if it's just constantly hitting you, it just feels like a lot, way too much. But this is the beginning of the game. This is fun. It's energetic. So we wanted it to start with actually the second section, so there's a little bit more movement. So if you look, this is what actually exported for the game. This is the mix I got back, and then I chopped it up. And we start with the second section, goes to the third section, then goes back to the first, which works because it already was built to loop anyway. So you still hear this stuff, it just happens later. But anyway, so yeah, the beginning's not really, there's not a lot to talk about here. It's just, again, some like slow spaced out synth chords. This is where things get a little bit more fun. I use the Juno again as sort of the main background of this, and it sounds like kind of a fun modulated sound. I'll show you the MIDI so you can kind of see what's going on here. Kind of like a C to E flat thing. F back down to E flat. Yeah, so that's kind of the background of that. And then we have some Korg monologue again stuff here. I think this is like a bass sound. Yep. And this is like another kind of arpeggiated thing in and around the other one. Such a cool sound. But if you hear about how that interacts with the Juno part, putting the bass back in, and then we have more of that kind of electronic noise percussion. And yeah, that's kind of how I built out the second section. And then the third section is really like the first big musical moment that we get in this game. And I think it's really fun. It kind of has this like endlessly growing arpeggiated thing. I feel like I actually don't use arpeggios a lot in my music. I realized this writing this score. But when you're writing synth music, and actually this was something I got from Pulp. When I was writing in Pulp, you can't do polyphony, which is multiple notes at the same time. So I was doing a lot of like arpeggiating out chords as like the accompaniment, and it like made me rediscover arpeggios. And so this MIDI part is the same MIDI part copied. It's played in the Juno and the monologue. Here's what it sounds like just in the Juno. I'll show you the MIDI, but it's this constantly growing, arpeggiating, moving thing. If I add the monologue in. And that it's like not going anywhere. It's not a melody, so it doesn't draw your ear in the way like a melody would, but it's just giving this like movement and emotion that I think is really fun, especially if you layer it with like some pulses. This is a Juno kind of pulse part that I wrote. Again, I'll show you the MIDI for this. Some fun kind of harmonic stuff looking at this, kind of looking back on it. It starts with like E flat major 7 to like a F add 4, like a B flat major 7, and then it goes to a C9, so we get that E natural, but then it goes right back to a E flat major 7 again. And if you have that pulsing part and you listen to it, oh, there's another pulsing part here. Listen to this. Oh yeah. So if you listen to all these pulsing parts together with that arpeggio, this is really the backbone of the cue. Adding some percussion. And for the bass on this one, I did some fun like arpeggiated bass runs in the monologue, and those sound like this. So fun. And as is the case with a lot of these cues, once we really build up and we really get going, we just long for that cello melody. And here's what the cello melody is in this one, isolated. With everything. Yeah, and that's kind of how we built out that tutorial cue called Swinging Home on the soundtrack. It's a lot of pulses, a lot of arpeggios, and then that just sweeping cello melody over the whole thing. And yeah, it's one of my favorite cues in the game. I think it does a great job like getting you excited for the game to come. The next one is, I think, the cue that we nailed the setting in the best, and it's for when you get into the hospital, also known as the Toxtum healthcare facility. So let's check that out. As the story in this game unfolds, you find yourself in a big and treacherously decaying hospital with your new health bot and eventual enemy, Dr. Prixie. This is really where we get poignantly introduced to the dystopian mega corporation Toxtum and its nightmarish effects on people's lives. For the music in this level, we wanted to walk the line somewhere between polished corporate everything is fine and dandy music, you know, maybe like what you'd hear in a real hospital, and what the hell was that type of music, which invokes a sense of things aren't quite what they seem. This is not maybe the safest or best place for me to be. Okay, so for the hospital level of this game, like I mentioned in the overview, we really wanted something that felt kind of like polished and corporate, but had these elements of, I don't know, like what's going on here? And so basically the backbone of this is once again a Juno patch, and it's just this incessant, never-ending kind of neutral, I don't know what you would call this. It's F, C, D, G. So it's not a very colorful chord. If I play it on piano here, you can hear what it sounds like. So yeah, it's kind of like a built-on force thing, because if you were to go up, it's like actually all fifths. So it's F to C to G to D, and I take the D down an octave. So this is very not defined. Like it's not like, you know, which adds the or. both of which are interesting. And I do play between the F major and the F minor with the A versus the A flat. But because this arpeggio and ostinato is just, I don't know, it sounds nice but undefined, and that sort of became the backbone. And with the Juno playing it, it sounds like this. It's really cool kind of background sound. Feels very hospital-y, like exploring, going around. And then we have another Juno layer, and this is that 23 patch, the one that I use all the time. And this is the very like polished corporate-y sound, and that sounds like this. Some interesting kind of clustery chords. And then it kind of grows, like playing on, this is definitely playing on F major, kind of. And that's sort of like, the part of the cue, if you just play those two things together, it's very nice. But then there's this thing in the background on the monologue, and this actually I did the sequencer on the monologue, so you don't see the MIDI for, but it's this kind of disturbing, almost like an ambulance sound, and it sounds like this. It's almost like, again, like an ambulance siren, and then there's these creepy Juno sounds that come in. It's almost like a horror. It's like very undefined. But if you play that with the chord, that's what leads to the little bit of the unsettlingness. Yeah, it just adds a layer of like, ugh, like what's going on here? If we play it here, some more of the unsettling stuff. And this is where I really start to play again with the tonality. I start to cheat in at F minor instead of F major a bit. And yeah, it just adds some weirdness. And then I have this cello doing this like textural kind of ambient harmonic stuff. And then once it really gets going, we have a bass sound from Podolsky. I think this is free. It's from Yuhi. It's great bass sound. Sounds like this. And then played together with everything, we got another cello melody. And we get some more kind of atmospheric moments towards the end of the cue. That same anamorph patch from before. And this is that corporate, like, almost like a corporate ringtone. Welcome to Toxtum. And then unsettling again. And that's kind of the way it works. So it's that blend of like polished corporate, everything's good, undefined kind of background, but then also some like creepy ambulance sounds. And that's basically how we made it. Now a little bonus cue is before you get into the main hospital here, we get this like really disturbed hospital cue, and I basically just took I literally called it disturbed. Added like a ring modulator on it, I think. Yeah, this right here. And that sounds like this. This is right after you get your health bot and your new prosthetic, which sucks. This is so creepy. It's fun. I love it. I think it was a really great approach from Kip for how he wanted the hospital to feel, and that's how we did it. So the next cue is actually based off the first music I ever wrote for the game, and it's when you get into the old temple. So let's check that out. The cue for the old temple was the only bit of music I didn't really have to write, or what I should say is I had already written. The original prototype that I had done music for years prior was also in the temple, So the director Kip wanted me to keep that original idea and melody. We loved that it felt bittersweet and emotional while having a great energy and moments that felt like the musical equivalent of swinging. In this level, you do a lot of platforming, puzzle solving, exploring, and quipping with Dr. Pripsy. So when I originally wrote music for the prototype of this game, which happened before this was ever going to be on Playdate, I wrote a piece of music literally in 15 minutes to just get it in under the gun for there to be something in the background when people played it. And one of the melodies that came from that was this. Which the director Kip really connected with. And so when we went to make the temple level in our actual game, we knew that we wanted to pull from that melody. And the way that we started that was just by spacing it out kind of 3 notes at a time on the Juno, and it sounds like this. Can you hear that hum of the Juno? Which gives some nice space, and it goes on and it finishes the melody. And then the next layer gets a little bit more involved, and we have some chords in the Juno. And over that we layer a melody from the Juno. Together they'll sound like this. And then for the final layer, this is really where we stole from the prototype. And what I thought would be fun, just really quick, is to do a crossfade of the original prototype version of this and then the actual version that made it in the Playdate game. So let's check that out right now. Okay, so how did I build that out? Well, it started with a lot of the same percussion actually from the prototype, which is this like east-west tiki-tiki sound from Storm Drum, and then this little clicky perk thing. It sounds like this. You know, kind of hemiola triplet thing. And then we have the bass. If we add that in, sounds like this. We have our arpeggio in the Juno. And then another arpeggio in the Juno, which is actually outlining the melody and arpeggiating the melody. Again, a lot of arpeggios in this. You can hear I'm riding the filter too as I record the Juno in on that. And then if we add in the live cello with the actual melody, it sounds like this. And that's how we built out the cue and kind of how it became what it is. I also did a bunch of like modulation on this so you can hear it kind of like gets warbly, which just adds, you know, a lot of movement. And that's the cool with the live synth thing, because I'm like sending MIDI out of Cubase into the Juno. I can turn knobs and do things as it plays in just to give some like sense of performance and humanity to it. But yeah, that's Temple. The next cue is probably my favorite one from the game, and it's the Hanging Forest. So let's check that out. The Hanging Forest is my favorite level and setting in the game. By now, the swinging mechanics are in full effect, and trust me, you're gonna need them, because the platforming is challenging and the stakes are high. Taria is closer than ever to finding her sister, but the danger in her path is growing exponentially. We wanted this music to be a bit darker, a little bit more tense, while still always holding on to that emotional undercurrent. This music explores a lot further harmonically and texturally than the music before, but that only matches this exotic and encapsulating underground world in which we find ourselves. Every once in a while in a project, when you're far enough in that you've written some music that you feel happy with, you can actually settle down and feel comfortable, and that's when the music that I think is the coolest ends up coming out. And The Hanging Forest is definitely one of those cues. At this point, I had written a lot of music for the game. I was feeling really good about it, and so I was able to relax and experiment, and then I ended up making something that I love so much. I think it's so cool. And the backbone of it, the kind of atmospheric undergirding of this, is another Animorph patch called Backslider Pulse, and it sounds like this. You can probably barely hear it, but it's just this kind of pulsing, constantly moving thing. Kind of gives this unsettling, constant movement. And harmonically, I was experimenting again with arpeggios on the Juno, and I kind of have this like G minor to E flat to C minor thing, and that sounds like this in the Juno. Yeah, kind of undefined, but definitely a lot less like emotional and uplifting as the past stuff. And it kind of does that over and over and over, and then eventually breaks out. So this is it again. You know, slight different variations in the arpeggios, and then it goes a little bit further. Like a D flat, you know, venturing harmonically, and then even further here. So it's all the same like shapes of arpeggios and even the same bass note in a lot of them, but it just takes you to different places. And that became really fun once we got into the meat of the cue, because I was able to really play with, again, some cool kind of arpeggio things. And in the Juno, that sounded like this. It's just so fun harmonically. It's like subtle variations and movements, and together with the original layers and now the bass, that sounded like this. And then we got another cello melody that joins in. Simple. Something about the way the cello sits, though, in Forest is just so cool. This is where it sits. And then we get to one of my favorite textures I have ever created, and it's so simple. It is this percussion loop that I chopped up and did a bunch of stuff with and washed out, and it sounds like this. Just super kind of subtle and weird. And then I took this MIDI and I squashed the bejesus out of the wave on this Model D. It's a Behringer synth trying to sound like the Moog. It sounds awesome. I love this thing. I got it for like $150 at a Guitar Center in Chicago. But it's this fast arpeggiated thing, and I made the attack super quick and like no decay, no sustain, and it's just the kind of sound, and that sounds like this, and I just thought it was so inspiring. It's so like tactile, and with the percussion, it's just so like, oh, it's such a vibe. I love it so much. And what's going on harmonically? I mean, it's not like anything complicated. Sort of outlines like a G minor thing. Kind of this like constant, it's almost like you have this contrary motion with the G in the middle. But it's so squashed that the notes almost don't matter. And when you layer it with some more harmonic stuff like that Juno patch again, it sounds like this. Just the way those interact together, just listen to those two things. Like at this point, that Model D arpeggio is more of a percussion than a note thing. But as it gets swelling to the final section, it's a lot louder. Open the filter a bit, and then everything comes back in, and it's just like... So we're back to that original arpeggio, those two arpeggios together. Our cello. And all together. And yeah, that's Forest. It's just, again, just finally being comfortable enough to really experiment and try to make something that matches the kind of underground, exotic world of this level. And I'm just really happy with what we made for it. So the next cue is probably my second favorite in the game, and it's the end credits cue, which was based off of a brainstorm, and here's how that came together. The second piece of music I ever wrote for Taria and Como after that prototype score that was used in the temple was a piece called Taria and Como Brainstorm. This piece is where I found the main melody for Taria and Como, and it's what became our end credits cue. It's uplifting, emotional, and propulsive. Okay, so like I mentioned at the very beginning with the main menu music, that main theme, that that's kind of syncopated, doesn't fall on the downbeats, that melody was actually written in this cue, which was the first bit of music I wrote for the game once we got it signed with Playdate. And so this is definitely the clearest example of that cue, sort of in its entirety. And it just sings in cello. I mean, just listen to it here in cello. It's just, yeah, dude, Isaiah just played the shit out of that. And basically the environment that I put that melody into started with this ostinato, and even though this is the patch that plays it at the beginning of the cue, I originally recorded it into here, and when I started this game, I didn't have a way to send MIDI to the Juno yet, and I was actually borrowing a friend's Juno, and so I did this with the arpeggiator because I couldn't play it in well enough. And I like set the arpeggiator as close to the tempo as I could and would like lift notes off to get it. You can see I had to chop it up to get it to work, but this is the arpeggio that I came up with. You know, this is real Juno stuff. I mean, that's like verging on 80s. But when I actually got MIDI for it earlier on or later on in the process, I sequenced it here in this patch. It sounds like this. That chorus of choir sound, and then cello hints at the melody here. And then once it really gets going, our elements are again this arpeggio in both of these patches on the Juno, and that sounds like this. And then layered with that is some pulses. There's two different pulse patches. One sounds like this. The other one sounds like this. Bass also plays it. And if I show you all these kind of pulse things, you'll see they're also not really on the downbeat, right? They're almost like a overlaying thing. They're kind of every 3/16 notes, and then they reset every other bar, so it sounds like this. So it kind of this hemiola thing. Bum 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 bum. It just makes for an interesting sort of like rhythmic, not straight aheadness that I really, really like, and all together it sounds like this. And Isaiah doing his thing on the top. Shout out Lil Oldie, which is one of my favorite zebra patches. I use it all the time. I sneak it into stuff. It sounds like this, doubling the melody. It's such a cool patch. That's doubled with the choir, that little anamorph choir thing. And then with cello. Yeah, just really simple. Lots of movement, lots of Juno. I mean, basically a billion tracks of Juno, cello, and some Model D bass, which is this guy right here. And that was our end credits cue. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. The last thing we'll take a look at in the game are the cutscenes, and here's how we did those. Cutscenes in this game were always going to be a challenge, but luckily Kip discovered this panel system that we could use to make scrolling comics with parallaxing and animations. These were super immersive, but simple, and a great way to do cutscenes that gave us some anchor points for music. We could have music play under all the panel pages and have individual one-shot cues play on triggers from each panel. We use this to accentuate key moments in the panels. And I think we did it most effectively in the reveal of Dr. Prixie. If you made it to the end of this video, you're incredible, you're my hero, thank you so much for watching. I really do just make YouTube videos that I wish that I had to watch when I was learning how to do this stuff, and so I hope you appreciate the deep dive into all the music and methods and the ways that I created the score for Taria and Como. Again, please, if you can play the game yourself, it is just the best way to experience this music and this world and this story. So grab yourself a Playdate. They are so much fun. There are so many great games. Buy Taria and Como from the catalog or get the entire season of games and enjoy it and crank away and have the time of your life. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment what you thought. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. Subscribe to my channel. I've got a ton more videos coming like this, and I'll see you in the next one.